In the last episode we looked at parts of Charlemagne's life. In this episode, we continue. Talks occur and fail between Charlemagne and King Godfred, the Danish king. 806. Charter division Regnorum defines succession and its contents would have an impact on several individuals, amongst some of them would be Charles, Pepin, and Louis. 808. Numerous events would see the involvement of Godfred in some Slavic tribes, and would see a response coming from Charles the Younger. Godfred and the Slavic tribes had found themselves active in Obotrite lands. Several other events would occur surrounding it in connection to this. Death of Godfred in 810. 810. Constantinople receives envoys from Charlemagne seeking peace. Nicephorus I dies in 811, but peace is achieved through the actions of Michael I. Charlemagne throughout his reign implements a lot of changes that would transform the landscape in Europe in several spheres. These include the worlds of the military, administration, and governance. Charlemagne makes changes in his will amidst the death of several people in Charlemagne's life, including his son Pepin the Hunchback and Charles the Younger. 814 would see the death of Charlemagne. Throughout the history of Charlemagne, some wars and conflicts would come to span several years and would involve numerous individuals over a large territory and space. One of these wars would be the Saxon Wars. We will go into some detail about them here. Saxon Wars from 772 to 804. There would be a collection of battles and conflicts that would occur under the reign of Charlemagne and would take place over decades. They would see many events concerning them, which included events like raids and Saxon surrenders amongst them. Other events would also occur during this period that would concern Charlemagne and the realm that he had come to rule. The events of the Saxon Wars would occur over a large area and see several events occur. Involved in the fighting would be the Saxons, the Frisians, and the Carolingian Empire. The fighting would see figures like Charlemagne take up a role, seeing conflicts that would see fierce resistance from the Saxons. Several actions would occur over the course of the wars, with events surrounding a church called the Church of Deventer being a contributor to the events that would occur over the course of the wars and determining the future of several individuals and regions. The event had seen the Saxons involved in the burning of the church. The Franks would then move to invade territory belonging to the Saxons, reaching several positions in Saxon territory. Several Saxon locations would be attacked during the course of events. Opposition would continue even when Charlemagne would have to attend to matters surrounding his war with the Lombards, and several conflicts would still go on for a period after and would see the involvement of several significant individuals over the course of a conflict that would change history. Westphalia would be a focus at some point in time, seeing the attacks of the Franks, who would achieve some success, being able to gain some victories. As they achieved these victories, some of the people they would win against would be converted to Christianity, and eventually the territory under Charlemagne would grow. Several other conflicts would ensue, until a period of peace was achieved. Charlemagne would implement several changes in regards to the Saxons, including changes surrounding the law, and also politics. Some of his changes would not be popular with them, which would cause a revolt to surface, and numerous events would follow. One of them would be the Battle of Suntel. A period of conflicts would occur lasting years, and would see Minden see the presence of Charlemagne for a while. Several other events would still occur during this period, and some of them would lead to peace and revolts. Throughout the extent of the wars, Charlemagne would spend some time elsewhere, including periods of time where he would find himself in Italy. Another conflict of interest that would occur would be called the Avar Wars. The Avar Wars 788 to 803. Events during the Avar Wars would see many changes occur, including territorial changes that would eventually see a gain in the territory of the Franks. The Avar Khaganate would find itself involved in the wars, which had found their beginning roughly around the year 788. The conflicts would also involve Francia and saw the involvement of several individuals in events that would have an impact on numerous people and would play a role in the future of several individuals. The conflicts would follow a history of conflicts between the Avars and the Franks that had started decades and centuries earlier. It would also follow other events in the history of the Franks. For example, the Siege of Pavia, a siege which had seen conflicts between the Franks and the Lombards and had occurred around 773 to 774, seeing fierce fighting amongst forces. The surrender of Desiderius would eventually come along with the capturing of Carloman's family amidst several other events. Other events would have occurred in the general period, like the Saxon Wars, which would be a collection of battles and conflicts that would occur under the reign of Charlemagne and would last over a long period. It would come to stretch over decades in the history of the realm, occurring over a large area and seeing several key individuals involved. Playing a part in the fighting would be the Saxons, the Frisians and the Carolingian Empire. The fighting would see figures like Charlemagne take up a role, and would also see conflicts that would see fierce resistance from the Saxons against the actions of the Carolingian Empire. Several events would occur in the Saxon Wars over their course, and at some point Westphalia would be a focus. It would see the attacks of the Franks, who would achieve several victories followed by some intervening periods of peace. Surrounding events would eventually cause concern for the Avars, who would eventually find themselves occupying some territory, after which they'd find themselves withdrawing amidst several other events and issues. Some of the territory that they had invaded had included places the likes of Italy. Negotiations would occur but fail, after which the Khaganate would be invaded by Charlemagne, which would have to see forces attack from different directions. The events would see the involvement of Charlemagne's son, Pippin of Italy, who had grown up from the young boy. Pillaging would also occur during the events, as well as other situations that would occur over the course of the wars. These would find themselves eventually ending with territorial changes and victory for the Franks, in a conflict that had seen the involvement of several key individuals and would continue to have several and varying degrees of consequences for those involved. Several individuals over the course of history would also be of interest, and we will look briefly into them here. Pepin the Short. Pepin would be at some point in time a mayor of the Palace of Neustria. He would be king of the Franks from 751 to around 768. A role in which he would achieve many things. In this role, his son Charlemagne would follow him. He would die in 768. His own father had been Charles Mantle and his mother was Gertrude of Espay. He would co-rule with Carloman, his brother, a reign that would see several revolts that would occur by the Bavarians and other groups. Pepin would at some point in time become the sole ruler, and would eventually rise to become the king of the Franks with the support of certain individuals. He would undertake several changes, amongst which were changes in the law, and would also be involved in several wars that increased the territory of the Franks, being involved in several conflicts with various groups, and gaining the loyalty of several groups as well. His reign would also see him involved in conflicts with Ashtulf the Lombard king. Ashtulf's father had been Duke Pemo of Friuli, who had been involved in several events throughout his life, playing a role in the history of that time. His brother Ratchis would eventually abdicate from the throne, which would lead several consequences, amongst which were that Ashtulf himself would become king, and under him lots of expansion as well as several raids that would target different parties would occur and would have an impact on the history of the time and of the region. Some of his demands would be unpopular with certain people, including those in Rome, leading to Pope Stephen II's appeal to the Franks for assistance, setting off events that would have an impact on events even long into the future. 754 would see the departure of Pepin, and his eventual arrival in conflict with Ashtulf, followed by demands on Ashtulf which Ashtulf would go on to refuse. Several interactions would eventually see a treaty which would be broken, prompting the return of the Franks. Ashtulf would eventually die in 756, and with his death, other changes would occur. Carloman, brother of Charlemagne. Carloman was a brother of Charlemagne and son of Pepin the Short. The same Pepin the Short who had been involved in the history of the region in the time. Carloman would rule as king of the Franks from 768 to around 771. Born in 751, he would also be the son of Bertrade of Laon. The territory he would rule would include areas like Languedoc, Burgundy, and Alemannia, amongst other territory. His relationship with his brother would see the pair involved in some conflicts and come to head at times. He would die in 771. Duke Harajad of Friuli. His life would have many events occur, and at least one of them would see him come to a conflict with Charlemagne, and would see changes take place in Friuli. He would be Duke of Friuli over a period of years, and at some point in time he would rebel. Several events would occur following this, including a conflict between him and Charlemagne that would end with Charlemagne emerging victorious, as he would in many of the other conflicts that would occur over their lifetime. Other events would also see several individuals gain positions within Friuli. Gertrude, daughter of Charlemagne. Gertrude would be the daughter of Charlemagne and Hildegard. She would be born around 775 and live up to around 810. She would receive an education. Her and the Byzantine Emperor Constantine VI would at some point in time become betrothed to each other, though it would not reach reality as it would eventually find itself broken. Irene would be the mother to Emperor Constantine VI and would at several points in history play a significant role in the history of events that would surround this time and impact numerous individuals. She would eventually find herself replaced in her role. Duke Euricus's father would be Duke Liutprand. The year 734 would be the year that would see Duke Euricus' birth. He would live a life that would see several events take place. He would be the Duke of Benevento, and would eventually marry a woman who was daughter of a northern Lombard king, Desiderius. Desiderius would find himself involved in several conflicts with Charlemagne. He died in 778 after a life that had seen many events take place. Irene of Byzantium would be born sometime in the 8th century, would live within Byzantium and act as the regent, co-empress, and other roles at various points in time during her rule, making several changes and overseeing several important events. She would also come to interact with several individuals during her lifetime and would have an impact on their future. She was married to Leo IV and would give birth to Constantine VI, for whom she would act as regent. Her reign would be filled with several important changes, amongst which were several developments in several areas, though several revolts and controversies would occur as well. Her husband, Leo IV, would rise to the throne in his 20s following the death of his father and would carry out changes of his own. He would be born around 750 and would die at the age of approximately 30 in 780. His father had been Emperor Constantine V. His father would die during a campaign, after he had already been made co-emperor. Leo would be involved in raids against Abbasid Syria, and would claim at least one victory against their army. At some point in time, a plot against Leo would be discovered and some of the plotters would be punished. Some of the events that would occur during his reign would involve individuals the likes of Lacanadra Khan. Irene would become regent for her son Constantine VI, who would be quite young at the point in time that his father had passed away, which had been around 780. A role in which several events would occur whilst she occupied it. King Gudfred, the Danish king, under whom several events would occur. Gudfred would be a Danish king. His reign would follow that of Sigfrid and would last from around 804, stretching some years. Horik I would be his son, and during Horik's reign several events would occur. Gudfred would be involved in conflicts with the Carolingian Empire, conflicts that would have an impact on history. His nephew King Hemming would follow him and rule. Gudfred would have numerous children and many of them would in some way come to wield some power. He would die in 810. That marks the end of the audio cast into the life of Charlemagne, looking at some of the challenges and experiences that shaped his life as well as some of the events that would occur during his reign in both the domain that he ruled and in some of the regions that he would interact with throughout them. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more. Thank you.